Okay, I'm going to try to go question by question. I'll put timestamps in the description so you can jump between the questions if you want. And at the start of each question, I'll try to give a succinct answer and then go into more depth. So first question, how do you make something a comment? So what you'll do is if you've already got something that you've typed out, you'll want to select the lines or all the lines and then do command question mark, and that will comment, and you just do the same thing, command question mark, to uncomment it. If you want to just do one line, you can just have your cursor on there and do that, and it will comment it out for you. You can do it on an empty line as well, and then type stuff if you want. Stuff can be commented multiple times. If you select something that's already commented and something that's not, and you try to comment it, it will double comment the stuff that's already commented and single comment the stuff that is not. So that's that. Okay. When do capital letters matter? Why are some capitalized, some not? So in general, the thing that is important is that you are consistent with your capitalization. If I were to define a variable, what's it called, user equals user and user equals other user, these are two different variables because this one has a capital and this one does not. So stuff is case sensitive. So make sure you are consistent and you're using which spelling you want. The longer answer is that some words like this class and this def are important to Python, and those have to be lowercase to work correctly because it's referencing basically code that is written in by Python, and so it needs to be consistent with what they have decided. There are guidelines for how code should be formatted. The guidelines for Python are called the PEP or PEP guidelines, and they state that names of classes should be capitalized. If they're multiple words, you put them together and capitalize the start of each word. Variables should be lowercase, and if there are multiple words for variables or for methods, then it's all still lowercase, and then spaces are replaced with underscores. So when you look at the majority of Python code, that's what it's going to look like, and it's good to stick to that. If you do something that violates those guidelines, PyCharm will tell you with this little yellow squiggle, and it'll say, hey, functions should be lowercase. So, be consistent. I would encourage you to follow the guidelines. Somewhat in line with that is why are things spaced certain ways? And so that is, for the most part, PEP guidelines, like code, like if I put a space here, this code will still work, but it's going to say, hey, this is not up to, this is a PEP violation. The one thing you can do with, not necessarily with naming, but with spaces and stuff, it'll tell you can reformat the file. So if I click this or I do Alt-Shift-Enter, it will clean up some of the mess that I've made. And I do that all the time, writing code. I don't pay too much attention to doing stuff proper, and then I just reformat it so it all gets set up correctly. One place that spaces do matter in Python is spaces indicate belonging. So for example, this function, or define list guitars, and then I've got this colon. All of the lines that are in this function need to be 4 spaces or 1 tab further than than this def is. So this function is part of this class. So it is 4 spaces or a tab in from where class is. And then this for loop, which you don't need to worry about necessarily, but this being 4 spaces in says this belongs to this. So those spaces do matter. When you hit enter on a line, it will automatically go to the proper spacing for the next line if it's a continuation. But if I wanted to do like another function here, let's do this. It will auto indent for me, but this is in the wrong place, right? Like this needs to be further over. So what you can do is you highlight it, and then this should be the same on Mac, I think. You do Shift Tab, and that will tab it back the other way, or you can do Tab to indent it the other way. So those are the spaces that matter in Python. Okay. Next is when do you use quotation marks? So you use quotation marks to mark something as a string. Okay. You can mark something as a string with double quotes, single quotes, or triple quotes. The PEP guidelines say that you should use double quotes as your first default. If your string has quotes inside of it, then you should do single quotes. And then if your string has single quotes and double quotes, then use triple quotes. But they all just mark something as a string. And yeah. Okay. All right. So the final one is, what do return and class mean / do? So return statements are always part of functions. And a function is this def add guitar. This is a function. But functions and classes are just ways of organizing code. They are good ways of organizing code, but technically you could write anything without classes or functions. Classes in general are ways to organize like the properties or the state of something. And then methods are ways in general to change the state of something. So for example, this guitar store has inventory, which starts off as empty. In order to change that state of the guitar store, the state that it's in, we have this method add guitar. And that gets called down here. So we're adding a guitar to the store. We're changing its state. So again, methods change state, they change data, and classes organize data as a general idea. So like this guitar class has a couple of fields. It says we expect all guitars to have a name, a brand, a price, and an amount of stock. And so when we go to add guitars to the store, we supply a name, we supply a brand, the price, and the stock. And it's just a way to organize the inventory for the store, is that this is a guitar. Similarly, we could have, a keyboard class, or we could have, microphones or whatnot. And it'll make more sense the more you work on code and specifically larger projects. Classes are not needed for every project, especially smaller ones. Okay, to get to the return statement, return statements are simply saying when I call this code, this is what I am giving back to what is calling me. To make that a little clearer, I've got this other ChatGPT uh, code, which has two methods: fetch user info, so that returns just some basic user info based on which number you give it, and then a formatting user info. Methods in general should have kind of one core functionality, just a way to organize code. And so this is kind of a good division of two methods that do different things. So when I call my fetch user info with this number one, so it's going to return this, and it's going to store it into this user info variable. And then when I call format user info, it's going to take what I give it, format it. You don't need to worry about what this is doing, but it's just formatting it into a pretty way. And then it's going to store that into formatted info. So if I go ahead and hit play on this, it will. So here's the ugly thing that gets passed to the formatter. And then this is what the formatter returns. So ultimately, return statements are ways of moving data around and specifically altering the data that's passed into it.